Salutations everyone, this is Razor here to talk about the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate online experience. It's something that's come to the forefront of the Smash community, dealing with the quarantine and having all in-person tournaments being postponed or completely cancelled. So we have the Quarantine series, and Pound Online, and Le'Veon Bell and Hungrybox have created the box. So everything's going online because we can't have in-person tournaments right now. And that has put the online experience and connection, or connectivity issues, at the forefront of the Smash competitive scene, which is something that we've never seen before because we've always had it in person since the very beginning. And then we had the hashtag #FixUltimateOnline trending on Twitter, people talking about their gripes and showing how bad it is, and people theorizing ways that can fix it, or at the very least just crying out into the void, "Fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it! Fix it, fix it, fix it!" So let's take a look at the state of online play in Smash Ultimate, how it works, how it could work differently, how it can't work differently, and what ultimately will be done about it. This might be a sobering video to some of you people who think they know how things may work when it comes to game development and online connectivity. I myself am not a game developer. I have a couple of friends who are, so I won't speak to things that I cannot speak about. I will let you know when I don't know how something could work, but at the very least speculate based off of things that I do know. And I've gone out of my way to learn things about video games because I find video games fun and interesting. So I've learned a few things about them. So let's talk about the Smash Ultimate experience online. It's bad. We all know it's bad. It was bad in Smash 4. We won't even talk about Brawl. That was just, let's just pretend there wasn't an online connectivity with Brawl, because there basically wasn't. So we'll just say that it didn't exist. And the connection isn't the only problem. There are things that you absolutely can fix in Smash Bros. Ultimate's online experience, like not losing GSP when the enemy drops out or disconnects or leaves the game, or GSP as a whole is really whacked because it seems rather random about how much you gain or lose depending on when you do win and when you do lose, and people creating their own weird rule sets on weird stages with weird characters that just try to take advantage of the situation so they can farm GSP by using one cheesy mechanic. In a perfect world, even without changing the online connectivity issues, we could change some of the rules and implement things within the game client itself that will just give us a better experience. Allow us to do 2v2s online, right? Instead of having to be on the same console. For glory and for fun, we're both bad, but what we have in Ultimate is worse. Especially since it doesn't look for a good connection to your opponent, it just looks for someone that has a similar GSP to you. So while it would be great to have a ranked experience in Smash Brothers for those of us that are good enough, not including myself, obviously, but those that are good, in order to play other good players, that's what we want. You've had that in other fighting games, and some of them seem to work much better than others. There's a lot of misnomers out there, a lot of misconceptions on how video games and their online experience works, and a lot of it is centered around this magical word that everyone loves to throw around, and that is the word netcode. Fix the netcode, get better netcode. If you've talked to a game developer, some of them will tell you netcode's not a thing. I would wish people would not think that netcode's a thing. And it is a word, and it means something. It has a meaning, vaguely, but for all intents and purposes, netcode really isn't a thing. It's a blanket term that just is a description of the online connectivity from one gamer to another. That's really all it is. It's not something that you can just, if we just adjust the netcode, if we increase this thing on the netcode, or optimize this thing on the netcode. It's like, no, you don't. The developers don't go into a folder called netcode and then write better code in their netcode. That's not how that works. So it's a broad term that basically characterizes how the online experience between gamers is handled. There are many different strategies and different types of netcode that are used in games, and we'll talk about fighting games because it's different from other type of games where like on Battlefield you have dedicated servers and it works smoothly, and Call of Duty it's all peer-to-peer hosting and it doesn't work as well, and you're much more reliant on everybody's connection being good as opposed to the server side things, which can take care of a lot of those issues more natively, but you have a lot of more people playing those games. When it comes to fighting games, you have 4 people at the most, 2 people at the least. And you don't want dedicated servers in a fighting game because that just adds a middleman that you don't really need. Peer-to-peer hosting is the better way to go if you are going to use an online service for your fighting game. You typically have 2 different types of netcode strategies that are used: delayed based or delay input based netcode and rollback netcode. Most games, especially every game coming out of Japan, including Super Smash Bros., uses delay based or delayed input netcoding. Basically, whenever you input a command, say Zero Suit Samus's jab, since it comes out on frame 1. Once you input it, her jab will not come out 1 frame later. If you were playing online, it will actually come out quite a few frames later because it will make up for the time that it takes for your information to go from your console to your opponent's console, and that additional lag is put on your move from your side to make up for that travel time. So that way, the jab starts and is active the same frame for you that it is for your opponent. So there is no inconsistencies or unfairness when it comes to being able to react to those things, because the game state is going to be the same for you as it is for your opponent. Obviously, this incorporates delay, which is not an ideal thing. That's why we always have our tournaments in person, because we don't have to deal with that delay, but there's always going to be some delay, some sort of lag, because time is real and things take time, even if that is milliseconds. Obviously, we are humans and we have human eyes, so there's going to be things with lag, both with delayed based and with rollback, that we will not notice because we have human eyes and there's things that we cannot detect. That's how any moving picture works. And with the delayed based netcode, in Smash Bros. Specifically, you are going to have 6 frames of input lag, which is typically more than most fighting games have, and Smash Bros. Has an additional 5-frame buffer with that. And there's also, on top of that, this is new to Ultimate, the 10-frame hold buffer, which is causing all of our moves to buffer, where you're holding shield at ledge, let's say, and you get hit before that shield input comes out, and then you're off stage, but it held that input and it buffered it to come out later, and all of a sudden, boom, you're air dodging off stage instead of shielding on stage, and you end up dying. It's happened to everybody, happens to pros. It's a shame, and I don't think anybody likes this 10 hold frame buffer, because I have not heard of one good thing that can come from it, but it's a decision that Nintendo made, and it definitely has made the Ultimate experience worse. So feasibly, that is something you can change without changing the delayed base netcode, but that is a very intricate detail that Nintendo would have to get into, which is we will get into later discussion why that might not be something that we will see in the future. Obviously, with delayed base netcode, you're going to have your positives and negatives, just like with rollback. So we know that in Smash Brothers, it just takes your inputs and saves them, and it uses that to compare your game state to sync with your opponent's game state. That's how we have replays. It doesn't save an MPEG 4 video about the game that just happened. It just saves the inputs and then puts it into the match, and so it has both characters do those inputs at the exact same time. It's just re-inputting those inputs as opposed to showing you a recorded VOD, if you will. That's why with every patch, old replays won't work, because any changes that were made to percentage and knockback and things will show a completely different game, because it's not, once again, taking a recording from the old patch. It's going to take the inputs, and depending on if there are changes with those characters and those moves that were in that game, you are going to have a completely different outcome, and things are going to go cattywampus. With this system, it is very easy to detect desyncs, as well as anyone who's playing with cheats, because let's say someone has a cheat that makes their moves faster. It will have their game state completely different from yours. Your systems will detect that your games are not in sync, and it will drop that game. So that is a positive, that getting those save states to link and sync up is fairly easy, where in rollback there's a lot more complications that will make that syncing issue a more difficult thing to achieve. But obviously the problems with delayed-based netcode is that any input that you put in will be delayed an amount, and in Smash Bros. Ultimate it's a lot. And one of the big things with Smash Brothers is that our reactions are very, very crucial. More so than in other fighting games that have much longer animations. They'll have little cutscenes. Someone hits their one combo starter and they do their super combo, and then they combo that in their super duper combo, and they combo that into ooper pooper duper scooper combo, and then they'll have a long fall down animation, right? That's something we don't get in Smash Brothers. We don't get a lot of very, very long animations. So when there are lag spikes and fluctuations in our connectivity, that is going to hurt Smash Brothers more so than other games that have longer animations and things that are just pure muscle memory, true combos with long cutscenes and stuff like that. That's something we don't have. So the consistency with Smash Brothers is going to be a more difficult task than it is going to be in other games. The way that delayed-based netcoding works with connectivity fluctuations is where you're going to see a lot of your gameplay not look the way you would like it to. So say that there is a spike in the connection and some type of information from your opponent takes longer than the estimated few frames of delayed input that is put into your specific game to reach you. Because the game cannot proceed without information from both you and your opponent, it has no choice but to stop and freeze and lag and wait for that input to arrive, causing the game to just, chug along and play. We're basically watching a PowerPoint presentation at that time, and things are, stuttering and taking a very, very long time and making our experience not so fun. So delayed-based input does a bad job at dealing with network fluctuations. And if you live outside of Korea or Japan or Scandinavia, your country may allow monopolies to be legal for some reason, like in America, and internet isn't very good here. And America, I'm using that as an example because that's where I live, it's a very large country compared to Japan. Japan is 1/26th the size of our entire country here, and it's like 93% the size of California, and they're much more densely populated. So those connectivity issues and fluctuations, because they have better internet and are more condensed and closer together geographically, those problems aren't going to be as big of a deal over there, where all these games are being made using this delayed input type of netcoding. And obviously, if we're dealing with an online tournament where you have people from many states away, and obviously even countries away, with all different types of internet service providers, that's going to take a lot of lag. And we've seen that in a lot of these online tournaments where maybe just our feed or the commenters feed is like really, really bad and laggy, and they're just going to have to go off of sound cues to try to predict what's actually going on, so they can try to do some sort of commentary. But the reason that the delayed-based input netcoding is used is because it's easier. It's easier to sync the game states of the game, and obviously it's cheaper and it takes less processing power than the rollback type netcoding. So you'll see games like in Japan that will use these delayed input types of system, and Western games are really the only ones that use rollback based ones, even though we still have our delayed input ones like Skullgirls or Rocket Rumble, and you even had Mortal Kombat, which started with delayed based input, and then they retrofitted rollback input to help along with their system. Now a lot of people will be wondering, okay, why doesn't Nintendo just do that? Many, many, many reasons, one of which is going to be time and money. Obviously, it was determined by the developers of Mortal Kombat that it took about 2 years of man hours in order to implement that retrofit. And there's going to be a lot of different factors when it comes to implementing rollback netcode. So what is rollback netcode? We know we covered delayed-based input. So what rollback netcode does is it allows all of your inputs to have no input delay for yourself. So if you hit jab with zero suit, it will come out. There is going to be no delay, and none of your moves are going to be eaten. We all have had that experience in Smash Bros. Like, my jump was eaten by the lag, or my shield, or my down tilt, or whatever. If you have rollback system, none of your inputs will get eaten. Everything will happen for you as you input it. The way that it deals with, obviously, the delay of the connection of your opponent to be able to react properly is a much more complicated process when it uses rollback, because the game is being simulated on each individual console or PC, where the game is simulating what is happening. And then once it gets the info from what your opponent is actually doing, it will, if it needs to, roll a couple of frames back and start that animation in the past in order for it to come out at the frame that it should be coming out for your opponent to see. Just some of those frames will be missing on that startup, or it will start up on a different frame, to which obviously, with human eyes, we aren't going to be able to see that nearly as often. But what rollback does especially well is how it deals with lag. It doesn't change the way that the game functions natively. It just deals with lag a lot better because it hides the lag. It deals with those fluctuations a lot better because it uses a prediction system. So what the game does is that the game will always simulate the game by predicting that you are continuing to do the last thing that you did, which makes perfect sense because 60 frames a second, most of those frames, because we're humans and literally not AI robots, and obviously these animations take time, is that we are not doing unique inputs on every single frame. So it's very good to predict that you are going to be doing the same thing that you were doing 1 frame ago, because you are. Honestly, you are. Most in real life and both in video games, 1 frame to the next, you are most likely continuing the last motion that you were doing. And when you do change direction, or you stop something, or you try to shield cancel or what have you, change the last thing that you were doing, then the game will go roll back to a previous game state to make up for that prediction, quote unquote, being wrong, and will start that animation in the past. And this is obviously, as you can tell, a bit more complicated. It's obvious why prediction is good, and it's not as complicated as like first-person shooters where you have like bullet drop and a lot of different players and factors into that. We're just, 2 characters punching or shooting fireballs at each other, right? Rollback cares a lot about the game state because unlike delayed-based solutions, which could have problems at any time, rollback approaches only show a visual change if the new inputs from your opponent have changed the game state. So it runs the game, it simulates the game, and will only change things once an input is being read from one console to the other, if we're, on the console. So it does a good job at hiding that lag, whereas in delayed based input, we get that stutter whenever there is a lag spike or your jitter is really bad. That kind of things are hidden in rollback because of the prediction, and once it gets the actual inputs, instead of predicting what you're doing, it will roll a few frames back and start that animation when it was supposed to anyway, plus none of your inputs get eaten. Obviously on the technical side of rollback netcode, there's a lot more things that you're going to have to implement, such as saving all of the different game states, the particle effects, and you're going to have a lot more possibilities of having audio glitches because sometimes those predictions are going to be wrong, or you'll have a projectile with particle effects or a move with particle effects that are then going to have to cancel, and those particles are going to have to be destroyed at a certain point. But also that's more so on the visual side as opposed to the rollback side of things. So there's a lot more things that you are going to have to factor in, such as desync detection, which is really easy on the delayed based input. And the desyncs are going to be a lot bigger of an issue with rollback netcode. So as you can tell, especially with things like particle effects and sound effects that start playing where they never should have been played in the first place, those things have to be canceled out. It's not an easy thing to do. So the stipend that your game is going to have on the processing power of your console, for instance, is going to be much, much bigger. And when you have something as small and graphically not very strong as the Nintendo Switch, I'm not sure if rollback netcoding is even possible or feasible to work well on this tiny, not so powerful system, because you have all these different types of packet loss and latency issues that you have to work and detect for and recycle back things to different kinds of game states. So obviously there's going to be a lot bigger taxing on the console or, computer that is running this thing, because it has to prioritize so many different things and make different kinds of calculations. It's not as complicated as it might be in other games, but obviously it's going to take a lot more processing power in order for that kind of system to work. And I'm not sure if the Nintendo Switch is capable of that. And even if it was, Nintendo really has no incentive to make that change or really any other change. It obviously has the longevity and the money. It's the fastest selling Nintendo game in the history of time, believe it or not. And so it shows that, there's a large player base. People are going to continue playing it. People are still buying it, and there's still DLC and patches coming out for the game. So that is not an issue. But it also can be a victim of its own success because so many people play it and so many casual players, to where you take a look at other fighting games where almost the entire audience is the hardcore competitive scene. With Smash Brothers, that isn't so. A lot of the reason because it's so popular is because it appeals to both the casual players as well as the hardcore players that really only come up with a small percentage of that player base. Take a look at Smash 4. It sold way better on the 3DS than on the Wii U because more people had the 3DS. And obviously that was not the optimal way to play Super Smash Bros. 4, but people didn't care because most people were not the hardcore competitive types of people. And Nintendo, the company that is, notorious for not giving a crap about the competitive scene. You take a look at Rivals of Aether or Brawlhalla or Street Fighter, have way bigger pots and pool prizes for those games, even though they have way less entrants and way less viewership on Twitch and way less views on VODs on YouTube. They still have way bigger prize money because their developers are supporting them and getting, the ads for them to justify those big costs. Nintendo doesn't do that. They've ran a couple of invitational tournaments and they did one or two Splatoon things as well. Nintendo doesn't have interest in the competitive scene or supporting it. This is very well known and obvious. We can argue that that's not a good thing, but it's also a reality. So while there are games like Skullgirls which allow you to customize how many frames of delayed input that you have in your game, Nintendo's not going to do that. You think the company that made the Wii not HD because they didn't think enough people had HD TVs is going to implement something so specific to a competitive scene that is going to be, technically difficult to implement for millions of people that wouldn't even look into the options of this game? No, that's not a feasible thing. They are not going to change to rollback because of every reason that I stated. I don't think it's pessimistic to think this way because it's easy to think that Nintendo is going to continue to do what they have done forever. So the Smash 4 product online wasn't great, and they even made it worse in Switch. They didn't make it better in Ultimate because we had For Glory and For Fun. Those were not perfect, but what we got here was even worse. And you think that having a competitive, Elite Smash GSP is a fun, awesome thing because so many of other competitive games have that. So it makes it seem like they're trying to cater to that audience. It was handled poorly, and the connection is still just as bad, arguably even worse with this 10 frame hold buffer that we have that screws everybody up online. So we've seen these effects happen in these online tournaments. You have 21 frames of lag natively at the least without lag spikes in order to react to something, and guess what's 18 frames? PK Fire. That's why Nesses have always destroyed online, and why every Timmy and Jimmy on Elite Smash is running Ness and Lucas and rolling people instead of seeing, what the top players are using because they're just way better online. Little Mac doesn't look like the worst character in the game online. Ganondorf destroys online because he can take advantage of all these really laggy situations. And if you try to play combo-specific characters like Sheik, even though Mr. R has done his darndest to place in top 8s in these online tournaments, and Jokers, they're not nearly performing as well as they could be. Leo isn't even using Joker online because of it just doesn't work so well. And you have players that you've never heard of and, winning and getting in these top 8s where they were not doing as well on these in-person tournaments. So when you see characters like Ness dominate, it's because of these lag issues. And that's not even, putting into consideration, connectivity issues. Just the native lag that will always be present no matter what is going to benefit types of characters and hurt very specific frame combos and ledge traps and things that people are used to going for. So they're having to switch up their characters and they're having to fight against different kinds of characters in matchups that are a lot tougher because of these laggy things that it's not feasible to think that Nintendo is going to fix. They don't have any reason to change that because they haven't supported the competitive community before, and asking them to put in further man hours and time and money into catering to such a small percentage of people in their hugely selling video game. Sure, start a hashtag, but you're just yelling into the void at that point. Nothing's going to change, and that's the harsh truth of things.